Hi, Mark here, and welcome to another video in which I'm going to look at some aspects of acoustic playing. This video has been inspired by a few of my students who are new to the guitar. I see these guys once a week, and I've realised over the past sort of few weeks, because I've got quite a few new students, they're all sharing the same, I won't call it a problem, but it's the same kind of hurdles, if you like, when picking with acoustic. Now, a lot of the girls that I'm teaching for some reason don't want to use a pick, and this was inspired by a couple of the girls, so I'm going to give them a shout out. Enola, Carlotta and Elise, you guys making great progress, and it's really interesting to see how they're trying to develop their technique. So I thought I'd put this into a video because I'm sure, obviously, you know, if these three girls are sort of exploring this, there's going to be more people who are looking into how to develop their technique and also make it sound better, but don't want to use a pick. So one of the problems I've realised with what they're doing is the way they're hitting the strings, and it's to do with the wrist movement and not the arm movement. So let me just demonstrate that and the sound. If I'm going to play an F chord, which I've got to say is a pretty tough chord for any beginner, and it took me a few months to play an F when I started playing, most of the guys at the moment are playing like the small F and maybe tilting that finger there. So when you play a normal F with a bar, you obviously get the full spectrum of the 6 strings. If the bar is a bit of an effort to start with, it's, you know, it's reliant on strength and a bit of muscle development there. An option is to play the F either with fingers like that without the bar across, or even just like this. But the problem is, if you keep that top E string open, then you get an F major 7, which doesn't always fit. Okay, so the trick is then to tilt this finger that's like that way flat, so you get both those strings, but then you've got to put these other fingers at this angle while that one is flat, which is a bit weird to start with, so it takes a bit of getting used to. But anyway, the problem is this: most people are, especially you guys, the new players, are probably hitting the guitar like this. And then you go to a C chord, and then maybe an A minor. And what's happening is these strings are not always involved in the chord, and what happens there is you hit them, but they don't add any value to the chord. And so if you play an A minor, then obviously, as you may know, that's the A root note, but the E, although the E is featured in the chord, because of the weight of this string and its volume, and it's a heavy string, it kind of dominates the sound. So when you hit that chord, it's too much. So you want to be focusing on the higher strings, which actually affect how the chord sounds. So if I played a typical progression, which, you know, there's millions of songs these days, especially the acoustic stuff, it's just, you know, 4 chord specials all the time with a capo and you're changing key. Something like this. Okay, I'm using my wrist predominantly. I know I'm using my arm there, but my wrist is actually doing the work. So look, if I hit my, you know, I'm not going, there's a big difference there. My wrist is really relaxed, my arm is kind of, this is a big guitar actually, this is a dreadnought bodied, no, jumbo bodied acoustic, so it's a big old guitar. But your arm wants to be kind of resting somewhere in this region on the guitar, depending on, you know, how big you are, what guitar you've got, etc. Because what happens is then you take the weight off your shoulder and your elbow, and your wrist can do the work. Now, why this is important is because, look, if you play a C chord and you're starting to hit by doing this, and then the G is fine if you're playing a big G, but then you go to the D, you're hitting these strings, all of these bottom strings are doing is dominating the sound, and you're not actually getting the difference in the tone of the higher strings. So what that means is that you've actually got to think about hitting the strings down there, not there. Now, it's a tiny adjustment, you know, we're talking like ½ an inch of movement, a couple of centimeters at most, yeah? But the difference it makes to your tone is massive, because then when you start hitting a C chord and you're hearing the the sweetness of those notes come through, not just the bass notes which are going to dominate the sound. And especially when you get to chords like A minor and the D, because these are just going to dominate the D chord. So it's all down to the wrist. Okay, now if you can relax your arm somewhere so that the weight is taken off, you probably find your arm hanging forward, which is fine, because then your wrist is just going to move like that, not up and down. Okay, so there's a big difference there. Oh, and talking of my acoustic players, I just want to say thanks to Natalia. Привет, Natalia, for my Wester Point shirt. She brought me back from Portugal recently. Thank you. So going back to playing these chords, if you can focus on making your wrist do the work, not your arm, because then you end up miles away from the strings anyway. Okay, with the D chord especially, or a D minor, where you want to hear those higher notes come through, not because they've got nothing to do with that chord. So real quick little tips there: relax, move the wrist, try to hit the notes that you're fretting, not the bottom strings, and let the power come from the wrist. The second aspect of that is how you actually connect with the strings. Now, everyone's got different techniques. For example, some people are just doing that with their fingers, some people use the same finger, some people are playing with their thumb. Now, with the thumb, that can get a bit awkward after a while, because you'll end up getting blisters down there and then won't be able to play at all. So that's a very limiting technique. But if you can find that position where your hand is comfortable, then how you do that is obviously a very personal thing, but you want to aim to make a good connection, not so you're hitting the strings, but pushing through them. Okay, you don't have to be hard or aggressive, because that will just rip your fingers up, but just push through the strings. Okay, and when you're strumming, you can see my wrist is moving there, not my arm. I'm not going, because it's too intense and you end up hitting all the strings again. On the upstroke, what I try and do is I'm trying to come down with my fingers. Sometimes it's like I've got a pick, but there's actually no pick there, so I might use a couple of fingers to come down, and then I'm tilting my hand and then hitting it with the thumb on the upstroke there. So to lean in and show you that a bit more detail. So my thumb is connecting with the strings on the upstroke. Okay. So if I wanted to play faster, rather than trying to do downstrokes, which gets a bit clumsy, you can go a lot more relaxed. And if you want to upgrade your rhythm from sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, which is, you know, where most of us start, and you want to add a bit more flair into it, especially for acoustic, then lighter strokes, use your wrist, and try and find where that connection works for you. So some real sort of basic tips there for newer players, and to try and overcome some of those hurdles which everyone seems to suffer with. So I hope this video has helped you a little bit, and if you've got any comments or feedback, please drop me a line in the comments below. I always read them and try and reply when and as soon as I can. If you haven't already, please subscribe if you like these kind of tips. Okay, see you next time. Good luck with your playing, have fun.